Welcome back, viewers. This is Self-Defense and Prepping Worldwide. This is episode 2, and today we'll be discussing the first of the 5 basic needs, which is shelter. I will give you 5 keys to shelter, and you need to write this down and start getting prepared from the very first episode. So let's get to it. The reason food and water is not a need on its own is I figure that 99% of the time when you're eating food and drinking water, you're doing it at your place of shelter. So that's either you eating at home, you're eating your lunch, your dinner at home, or you're eating at somebody else's home. Maybe it's not your shelter, you'll still be, but most of the time, even if you're camping, you'll set up your tent and you'll be eating and drinking outside your tent. So at your place of shelter, that's where you eat and drink. At your place of shelter is where you store your food, generally speaking. Even when you're camping, you'll be storing the stuff inside the tent with you. So you generally don't have shelter without food and water, and you generally won't be eating and drinking except for at your place of shelter, with 1 or 2 exceptions. So the first part of food and water is food. In terms of food, in prepping, it comes down to 2 things. You either need to produce your own food, which fortunately I can because I'm on a small farm. And secondly, if you can't produce your own food, you need to stock up on food. You need to store as much food as possible. The reason for this is that the food supply can become interrupted due to a global or a national event. As we've seen with COVID-19, a lot of restrictions suddenly get placed on essential items, what you can buy, what you can't buy, and this is just the beginning. It could have gotten a lot worse. There could be, if the farmers got sick or if there was an interruption in the supply chain, you could go to the grocery store, the supermarket, and the shelves could be empty, and then you're unable to feed your family. If you have to constantly be buying food on an almost daily basis to feed your family, then you're not really prepared, and that's what this channel seeks to address. So the first part of that then is to buy as much food as you can for an emergency situation. Most other prepping channels talk a lot about MREs and these fancy meals that you can buy specifically made for prepping, but the truth is here in South Africa you're not going to get those easily, so it needs to be stuff that you can get at your supermarket, because you either need to buy over time or you need to go out and get it like in a hurry. So it needs to be something that's easily available. With that, the main 2 things I would suggest you stock up on are your various forms of grains and porridges, like maize meal porridge, pap, that we call here in South Africa. Rice is a good thing, beans, samp, those kinds of things. Those things that come in a big packet, you can buy many kilograms of them very cheaply. The main aspect that people don't like about that is that they're used to a Western diet. They are used to things that come from bread, so they're used to eating toast and sandwiches, hamburgers, that kind of thing. And when you're in a shit hits the fan situation, your diet is going to have to change considerably. You're going to have to eat a lot more like people do in the developing world, and they are strong and healthy, so it's just a matter of taste and a matter of getting used to it. Some of the stuff can be made really tasty. It's just a matter of looking for the right recipes, being creative, and adding some spices and flavors, those kind of things. So that's another thing you need to stock up on, are the things that come like in powder form. So salt, pepper, some spices. Although they do go quite far, just have like an extra month supply. Also anything that's like powdered soup, powdered gravy, what's it called, the soup in a mug, what you make, just pour in hot water. Those kind of things you can also buy and stock up on, and they last a long time. And they take up very little space. So the first thing is grains, and anything that comes in like a powder form that can be made into a soup or a gravy, you can thicken it, and it just adds flavor and also adds nutrition to a lot of meals. Then you want to look at canned goods. Canned goods last a long time, obviously, from the canning process. It's just a matter of taste of what you want to get. You want to try and get as big a variety of canned goods as you can, so that you have enough protein from tuna or meatballs, those kind of things, And then you also want to look at something sweet like your tinned peaches, your tinned fruit, because when it's a really bad lockdown or the situation is really bad, you want something to lift your morale, and tinned fruit and sweet things really can help lift you up and just keep you going. In terms of tinned fruit though, really it's just a matter of preference, but get as much as you can and store it. You need to rotate it because it doesn't last forever, but there are ways to rotate tinned food, and there's various ways to store it in large quantities that take up a small amount of space, as you can see in some of these pictures. It's really up to a case of preference and what you want to do. The second part of that is obviously then if you can stock up on as much food as possible, but you still need to try and produce your own food. And actually anyone can do this. You don't have to be like me, you don't have to stay on a farm. I'm fortunate like that. But even if you have stay in an apartment and you just have a balcony that receives a bit of sunlight, you can grow some, actually more food than you would really believe. And I'll show you some of the techniques of how to grow food in a very small space, and what you can do just to keep, it's good for your morale, but also just for your health, and to have fresh goods, because if you're living off tinned goods and just grains and that, you're not getting the vitamins you need. We'll deal with vitamins in the health section, but in terms of the food, you need to try and get as much fresh food and much fresh vegetables as you can. And if you can't buy it from the supermarket or from the farmer's market, then you need to be able to grow it yourself, even if you stay in the city. If you grow it on the roof, grow it on your balcony. I'll show you some techniques. So the second key then to shelter, the second part of food and water, is water. Water is a little bit of a tricky one in that we kind of take it for granted, and secondly, you can survive without food for nearly 80 days. You can't survive without water for more than a week. Most of us in the world, we just turn on a tap and the water's there. It's a nice thing, it's a fortunate thing, but what happens when you turn on the tap and there's no water? Where I stay on the farm, we have a borehole, which means that all the rain that falls in this area seeps through the ground, gets filtered through the ground, and then it drips into this massive underground cave system, which forms like an underground lake, which they call an aquifer. And then we've got a borehole on the property, which is this really long pole. It's got like an Archimedes screw in it that then pumps the water up from the aquifer into our water tank. It's a really nice it's a really nice system in that we're self-sufficient. We don't have to rely on water boards or on municipalities or anything, but at the same time it's vulnerable in that if our pump breaks, or if the pole underground breaks, or if there's some form of blockage, we really are in a bit of a situation. Also, the pump is electric powered, so when there's power failures, we struggle to pump water. So we're coming up with solutions to that. We will invest in a petrol engine to drive the pump in a power failure situation, but it's still one source of water, which is what I want to talk about, is that whether you get your water from a tap, a municipal tap, a city tap, or even if you're out in the farms, you need to try and have two or more sources of water, so that if the one goes down, if there's maintenance or the water pipe, the water main breaks, you can have a separate source of water. It's not very easy to do because you might have to go looking for water, and in times like this when you're under lockdown, you can't go and find water. But luckily we're not in that really shitty situation yet. So with food, it's basically the same thing. If you can't supply your own water, then you need to store as much water as possible. So you need to get as many buckets, containers as possible. And if you hear about they're going to be cutting off the water mains, or there's going to be any interruption to your water supply in the news, like tomorrow they're doing maintenance, then you need to fill up all your containers, fill up your bath, and have as much water stored as possible so that you can still flush your toilets, do some washing and that. You should buy the 5-litre water bottles for drinking, and also as many of those bought water bottles as you can for drinking, but you don't use those for washing and that. You use so much water on a daily basis, you will need to have more than you think. So buy as many storage containers as you can, and try and get a separate water supply that doesn't rely just on your tap. Okay, so the third key then to shelter is maintenance. No matter where you're staying, if you're staying in a tent, in a caravan, in a house, in a shack, as good as it is now, sooner or later something's going to break down, there's going to be a leak of some kind, and you need to be able to fix it, otherwise it's no longer shelter for you. If your roof is leaking water when it's raining, you don't have shelter. So for that, for maintenance, you're going to have some tools. The basic tools that you're going to need, the first things you should get are not even tools themselves, but just things to put two different things together. So like duct tape and cable ties would be the first thing I would really suggest. And you should always have duct tape and cable ties, no matter how many power tools you have. They're the easiest things to fix small leaks and that. Also look for insulation tape, any tapes that are watertight in case you get a leak in your plumbing system, because nothing really screws up your shelter faster than leaking water. Then when you actually invest in tools, you want to get hammers, nails, drills, screws, those kinds of things, the tools that are made for fixing and putting things up. Those are the basic things. With a bit of wood and some screws and some hammers and nails, you can fix a lot of items that go wrong. After that, you want to invest more in power tools and things that will give you much greater ability to create stuff that you need, and also to repair things that you need. You know, cutting metal is really difficult unless you have a power tool. If you have a garden, you need to get spades, picks, forks. The thing I really think is that if you just want one tool for your garden, get a hoe, because that can act as a spade and a pick and a fork, and it's just the way it's weighted. It's very good for garden work. I do a lot of farming in that with the hoe. So you need to be able to maintain your home, and also really good glues. Go out and get some contact adhesive, some super glue, some epoxy. Get different kinds of glues, store them where you know that you can get them easily, and they will help you with most of your maintenance issues. Silicone, sealants, those kind of things. Be prepared for something to leak, be prepared for something to break down, and have the screws and the drills necessary to keep things going. Okay, so the third key, the food and water for one key today, is heating and cooking. Here in South Africa we have a lot of power cuts, so even though our oven is an electric oven, we have a gas stove with a gas bottle, and I would suggest that you always have more than one source of heating and cooking. Even if you just have an outside barbecue or a gas barbecue that you can use, that'll help a lot when the power goes out. Even if you don't have a barbecue, I would really suggest you get a gas canister with a basic cooker on it. You can fry eggs, you can cook meat on that, chicken and things like that. You can boil water on a kettle. So if you don't have anything else, get a little gas cooker with a cooking attachment to it. You can fit a lantern. That'll really just sort of boost you in terms of your prepping abilities and your abilities to withstand power outages or any unplanned stoppages to your normally electric supply of cooking and heating. With that, gas also runs out, so try and always duplicate. If you have a gas cooker, maybe get a Weber braai or barbecue that you can cook with charcoal or wood on it. Then you've got three sources of cooking and heating. If your electricity goes out and you run out of gas, you can still cook your meat on your Weber braai with some charcoal or some wood. And the same thing with lanterns. It's good to have as many lanterns as possible, not only battery powered, because there's a lot of good battery lights out there, but batteries run out and they get scarce. So you should also have paraffin powered lanterns, and you can get, like I said, you can get lanterns for your gas cooker. So have as many different kinds as possible, so that if one source of fuel runs out, you can still light your house, you can still cook, you can still keep things warm. Here in South Africa it doesn't get very cold, so even in the coldest winter, if you have a lot of blankets, a lot of sleeping bags, any extra coverings, warm clothes and that, keep that in mind. But as long as you cover yourself, you should be fine. You don't need to heat your house as such, although if you can, try and get something that burns a natural fuel. Don't use gas for that, because that's quite expensive. Okay, cooking and heating are the third key. The fourth key then is lighting. You need to have your house well lit. We will go over this in the security aspect, in terms of how a dark house leaves you very vulnerable. But just in terms of morale, and in terms of not getting into stupid actions, not falling over things, you need to have backup lanterns. You need to have as many light sources as possible. You need to have torches, as many torches as possible. And you need to try and get torches with batteries that are easily available. Some size batteries are less easily available than others. So I would rather you get two cheap torches that go on AAA batteries than you get one really expensive torch. You can use it. It's this great flashlight. It's 3,000 lumens. But after a few weeks, it runs out of batteries and you can't get more batteries, and it's kind of useless. So you need to have your house well lit. You need to have outside lighting, which we'll go over that more in security. In terms of shelter, you need to have enough lighting inside so that you don't trip over things, you don't fall over things, and you can still keep yourself entertained and have a reasonable day without electricity, because after a few days without electricity, if you don't have lighting, you sort of stumbling around this dark house with one little candle, you're going to start getting depressed, and it's really going to start wearing you down. So you need to have a well-lit house. And then the final key of shelter is entertainment. You need to be able to keep yourself entertained when electricity goes out. Mainly we're talking about electricity because most of our entertainment comes from electricity. You need to try and get ways to charge your cell phones that don't require electricity, solar chargers. Get some packs of cards, some board games, so that you and your family can still play and interact and have a social life that doesn't require TV or electricity. As long as you have those 5 keys all taken care of, you will have a very strong and prepared shelter, and you'll be ready to take on the world. The next basic need we're going to be dealing with in the next episode is security. But for right now, have a look at your homework and write down the things I've given you in this episode, and we'll move on. Thank you.